Admiral Marcus Reed stood before the assembled diplomatic corps of Earth. His weathered face grave as the holographic display behind him showed the Krell Armada advancing through the Orion Arm. 50 years of peaceful expansion into the stars had ended with a simple message: surrender or die. They worship war, the xenoanthropologist, Dr. Lisa Hayes, explained to the gathered representatives. Every species we've encountered has a patron deity of battle, conquest, or strategic violence. It's fundamental to their civilizations. The Krell believe their god of war, Krathal, demands sacrifice through conquest. "And what about humanity's war gods?" asked the Centaurian ambassador, his facial tentacles rippling with curiosity. "Surely, Earth has produced similar deities throughout your long history?" An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Dr. Hayes looked at Admiral Reed, who nodded for her to continue. "We had them once," she said. "Mars, Ares, Tyr, Hachiman, Kartikeya, dozens across our cultures. But they evolved. Evolved." The ambassador's translator struggled with the concept. "They softened," Reed interjected. "Our war gods became protectors rather than conquerors, defenders rather than destroyers. In most human cultures, the gods of war transformed into champions of justice, honor, and righteous protection. They defended the innocent rather than glorifying bloodshed. The Arcturan representative, a being of crystalline structure, vibrated in what their species considered laughter. How can a species survive with such weakness in their spiritual architecture? War requires ruthlessness, commitment to victory at all costs." Dr. Hayes stepped forward. "We don't see it as weakness. Our martial deities changed because we changed. Our understanding of conflict evolved. The bloodthirsty gods were replaced because we found better ways to resolve conflicts: diplomacy, mutual benefit, cooperation." "And yet," the Krell observer spoke for the first time, his gravelly voice rumbling through the chamber, "you are unprepared for our assault. Your colonies will fall because you have forgotten the essence of war. Your gods grew soft, and so did you." Admiral Reed's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps. Or perhaps we simply channeled our martial energies differently." He tapped a command into his wrist pad, and the hologram shifted to show Earth's defensive grid, an intricate network extending throughout the solar system. "We may not worship war, but we understand it. We prepare for it, and we excel at it when necessary." The Krell observer's head ridges flared in what might have been surprise or contempt. "Your species worships Krathal, who demands constant conflict and conquest," Reed continued. "But consider this. While your civilization has been locked in, an endless cycle of war for 10,000 years, humanity has built something different. We've developed technologies, art, philosophy, and sciences that you've sacrificed to your eternal conflicts." Dr. Hayes picked up the thread. "Our gods of war transformed because we recognized a fundamental truth. Perpetual conflict is self-defeating. It consumes resources, lives, and potential. Our gentler gods reflect a strategic evolution, not weakness." The emergency alert system interrupted further discussion, blaring throughout the complex. The Krell fleet had accelerated their approach. "It seems," Admiral Reed said grimly, "that we'll soon discover which approach to war is more effective. One born of 10 millennia of constant practice, or one tempered by restraint and deployed only when necessary." As the diplomats dispersed to their respective evacuation points, the Admiral lingered, studying the approaching armada. Dr. Hayes remained at his side. "Do you think they're right?" she asked quietly. "Did we grow too soft without bloodthirsty gods driving us toward conquest?" Reed's jaw tightened. "We're about to find out. But I suspect the Krell are about to learn something important about humanity." "What's that?" "We don't need gods of war anymore," he said, "because we've become something far more dangerous. A species that chooses peace until peace is no longer an option." The orbital defense platform Aegis floated serenely above Earth, a marvel of human engineering disguised as a commercial communications array. Commander Jack Wilson monitored the approaching Krell battlecruisers with steady hands, despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Still no response to our final diplomatic transmission," his executive officer, Lieutenant Anna Torres, reported. As expected, Wilson replied. Their cultural framework doesn't allow for backing down once Krathal's blessing has been invoked. For an invasion. The Krell fleet had scattered human forces across 3 star systems already. Their ferocity was unmatched, their tactics ruthless. They fought not just to win, but to annihilate, believing that total destruction of enemies was the highest form of worship. All stations report ready, Torres said. Civilian evacuation to the Luna shelters is at 94%. The Krell will be in weapons range in 20 minutes. Wilson activated the ship-wide comm. This is the commander. In 20 minutes, we face an enemy who believes their god demands our extinction. They've never known defeat because they've only fought species who share their worldview. Enemies who believe in the glory of war rather than its tragedy. He paused, watching the tactical display as Earth's disguised defense grid began powering up across the system. But we are different. We don't glorify war. We study it. We don't worship it. We master it. Our ancestors' gods of war evolved from bloodthirsty conquerors to protectors because we understood a fundamental truth. The greatest warrior isn't the one who loves battle, but the one who understands its cost. Dr. Hayes had joined Wilson on the command deck, authorized as an observer due to her expertise in xeno-religious psychology. The Krell believe we're defenseless because we have no active war deity, she said quietly. Their scouts reported our apparent lack of military infrastructure. Wilson nodded. Operation Masquerade worked perfectly. They see what they expected to see. A species that has grown soft. Except that was never true, Torres added. We just learned to hide our teeth. The first Krell battlecruiser entered the outer defense perimeter. Immediately, disguised mining platforms, communication satellites, and commercial stations throughout the system revealed their true nature. Weapon platforms, targeting arrays, and electromagnetic disruptors that had been hiding in plain sight. For decades, the Krell commander's shocked face appeared on the main view screen. What deception is this? You claim to have no military resources beyond your patrol vessels. We never claimed that, Wilson replied calmly. You assumed it because you couldn't conceive of a species that doesn't showcase its military might like a religious offering. The first salvos from Earth's defense grid struck with surgical precision, disabling the lead Krell vessels without destroying them. You see, Wilson continued, while your civilization spent millennia perfecting the art of glorious battle, we perfected something else. The art of ending conflicts quickly, with minimal casualties. Dr. Hayes stepped forward. Your god Krathal demands blood and spectacle. Our approach to war evolved beyond that. We seek efficiency, not glory. When we fight to end fighting. The Krell commander's facial ridges darkened with rage. This changes nothing. Krathal's will shall prevail through numbers alone. We have thousands of ships approaching your system. Wilson smiled grimly. Numbers won't help you against what's coming next. You see, without a god of war demanding constant tribute, we had time to develop technologies your society never imagined. As if on cue, the quantum displacement field activated, humanity's most closely guarded secret. The Krell ships suddenly found themselves scattered across space, their carefully orchestrated formation disrupted by localized space-time distortions. Your god of war made you predictable, Wilson said as the transmission began to break up. And in war, predictability is fatal. The Krell High Command vessel, Eternal Conquest, burned silently in the void, its primary systems disabled by Earth's unexpected defense grid. Supreme Commander Vrokthar watched with mounting rage as his invasion force was systematically neutralized. Not destroyed, but immobilized. The humans weren't even killing their enemies when they had the chance. Sacrilege, he growled to his second-in-command. They mock Krathal by denying us glorious death in battle. On the main view screen, a new transmission from Earth appeared. Not from their military, but from their diplomatic corps. The face of Earth's chief negotiator Tom Miller filled the screen, his expression neither triumphant nor hostile, but measured. Supreme Commander Vrokthar, we invite you to a ceasefire discussion. Your invasion force has been neutralized without significant loss of life on either side. We can continue this path and disable your remaining ships as they arrive, or we can talk. Vrokthar's claws dug into the armrests of his command chair. You dishonor us with this mercy. We call it pragmatism, Miller replied. Your species has much to offer the galactic community beyond war. We'd prefer to discover what that might be. Meanwhile, in a secure bunker beneath Geneva, Admiral Reed and Dr. Hayes monitored the exchange while reviewing the battle data. Earth's forces had performed beyond expectations, but both knew this was only the first wave. Their reinforcements will adjust tactics based on what they've learned, Reed noted. The quantum displacement field won't work twice on an adaptive enemy. Hayes nodded. The Krell evolutionary psychology is fascinating. 10,000 years of selecting for aggression and martial prowess has literally rewired their brains. Their neural scans show pleasure centers that activate only during combat, which makes negotiation unlikely to succeed, Reed finished her thought. Not necessarily, Hayes countered. They're not mindless berserkers. They have a complex honor code. If we can reframe peace in terms their cultural framework recognizes. Their discussion was interrupted as a junior officer rushed in. Admiral, we've detected unusual activity in the Krell flagship's engineering section. Energy readings are spiking in patterns consistent with a self-destruct sequence, Reed finished grimly. They'd rather die than accept defeat. On the diplomatic channel, Vrokthar was reciting what appeared to be a religious invocation. By Krathal's bloody hand, we offer our deaths as sacrifice. May our destruction seat 1,000 new warriors for the next assault. Miller's diplomatic training hadn't prepared him for ritual suicide. He looked off camera, clearly receiving urgent communications. Reed ordered an emergency transmission. Vrokthar, listen carefully. We understand the demands of your faith, but consider this. Krathal respects cunning as well as courage, correct? The Krell commander paused mid-invocation, suspicious. Your tactical manuals, which we've studied extensively, speak of the seventh principle of Krathal. The wise warrior lives to fight when victory is possible. Hayes whispered urgently, "What are you doing? We haven't translated their tactical manuals." "Bluffing," Reed whispered back. "Every martial culture has similar maxims." Vrokthar's expression shifted slightly. "You have read the sacred tactics?" Reed pressed the advantage. "We respect your traditions enough to study them. The current battle is lost, but your duty to Krathal extends beyond this single engagement. A true servant of the war god would preserve his forces for future glory." For several tense moments, Vrokthar was silent. Then, slowly, he made a gesture that their cultural databases identified as a religious sign. "The weapons countdown is stopping," reported the monitoring officer. "They're powering down the self-destruct sequence." "Perhaps," Vrokthar said finally, "there is wisdom in your words. A temporary ceasefire may be acceptable to Krathal. But make no mistake, humans, this is not peace." "We understand," Miller replied, seamlessly picking up the thread. "We propose a ceremonial exchange to honor your warrior's valor while we discuss terms." As the transmission ended, Hayes turned to Reed with newfound respect. "You understand their psychology better than I expected." "I've studied war my entire career," Reed replied. "Not because I love it, but because I want to end it efficiently when it comes. That's the irony the Krell can't grasp. We're better at war precisely because we don't worship it." The neutral meeting ground chosen for negotiations was Luna Base Harmony, originally built as a scientific outpost, but now serving as the first diplomatic contact point between humans and Krell. The station's observation dome offered a breathtaking view of Earth rising over the lunar landscape, a deliberately chosen backdrop meant to impress upon the Krell delegates the beauty of what humanity was protecting. Tom Miller adjusted his formal attire as the Krell delegation entered. Vrokthar led them, his massive frame dominating the room, ceremonial armor gleaming under the artificial lights. Behind him walked 3 other Krell, including one wearing distinctive symbols that Dr. Hayes had identified as belonging to their religious caste. "The priest is unexpected," Hayes whispered to Miller. "They're taking this seriously enough to involve their spiritual authorities." Miller nodded slightly. "Remember, this isn't a peace negotiation. It's a cultural exchange disguised as a ceasefire talk." The formal introductions proceeded according to Krell custom, each warrior announcing their name and greatest victories. When it came time for the humans to reciprocate, Miller had prepared carefully. "I am Thomas Miller, negotiator who helped prevent war between the Centauri Confederacy and humanity through 2 years of dialogue, saving an estimated 12 million lives. It wasn't a battle victory, but he had framed it in terms of lives affected, a subtle recontextualization of what constituted achievement. Admiral Reed followed with a similar approach, listing conflicts resolved and lives saved rather than enemies defeated. The Krell delegation's reaction was difficult to read, but they seemed intrigued rather than offended. The Krell priest, whose name translated roughly as Voice of Krathal, spoke for the first time. Your species confounds us. You possess the capacity for tremendous violence, yet you restrain it. You could have destroyed our vessels, yet you disabled them. Explain this contradiction. Miller looked to Hayes, who had anticipated this question. She stepped forward. There is no contradiction. Humanity once worshipped gods of war as you do. But as our civilization evolved, so did our understanding of conflict. We discovered that unrestrained warfare ultimately weakens rather than strengthens a species. Heresy, the priest rumbled, but without the expected hostility. Krathal teaches that strength comes only through constant battle. And yet, Reed interjected, your own history shows periods where the Krell Empire contracted after too many consecutive campaigns. Resources depleted, populations strained, technological development stagnated while you focused solely on weapons. Advancements. The Krell warriors shifted uncomfortably. This information wasn't supposed to be known to outsiders. How could you possibly know this? Vrokthar demanded. Because it's the universal pattern of empires focused exclusively on conquest, Hayes explained. We've seen it throughout our own history. The most successful human civilizations were those that balanced martial prowess with cultural, scientific, and social development. The priest's inner eyelids flickered rapidly, a sign of intense thought, according to their limited xenobiology database. You claim your war gods changed? He asked finally. They reflected our changing understanding, Hayes confirmed. Mars, one of our most prominent war deities, began as a god of bloody conquest, but evolved into a protector, a guardian of civilization rather than merely its weapon. Impossible, the priest declared. Gods are immutable. Miller sensed an opening. May I ask a theological question? Has Krathal always had the same aspects throughout your history? The priest hesitated, exchanging glances with Vrokthar before answering. There have been interpretative differences across millennia. The 7th dynasty emphasized Krathal's wisdom in battle over bloodlust. The Viridian Schism debated whether strategic retreat could be considered honorable. Exactly, Hayes said gently. Even your war god contains multitudes. Our species simply emphasized different aspects over time until the protective, strategic elements became dominant over the destructive ones. The conversation continued for hours, delving into comparative theology, evolutionary psychology, and the philosophy of conflict. Unknown to the Krell, every moment of dialogue was a victory for humanity's approach, proof that communication could succeed where weapons might fail. As the first round of talks concluded, Vrokthar approached Reed privately. Your defensive capabilities were impressive, he admitted reluctantly. But our reinforcements will not be so easily defeated. Reed met his gaze steadily. We're counting on it. You welcome more war? Vrokthar seemed confused. No. Reed clarified. We're counting on your reinforcements receiving the full reports of what happened here and making a strategic reassessment, just as any wise warrior would. The Krell reinforcement fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, expecting to join an ongoing glorious conquest. Instead, they found the first wave of their armada suspended in space, systems disabled but crews alive, and a formal communication channel established between their high command and Earth's leadership. Fleet Lord Drakmor, commander of the second wave, received Vrokthar's report with increasing disbelief. The humans had not only anticipated the Krell attack but had neutralized it with minimal casualties. Most disturbing of all, they had somehow leveraged Krell religious doctrine to initiate diplomatic contact. This is unprecedented, Drakmor told his war council. No species has ever repelled a Krathal-blessed invasion without massive bloodshed. His strategic advisor, a veteran of 17 campaigns, studied the tactical data. Their technology exceeds our intelligence estimates by at least 2 centuries. The question is whether they have sufficient quantities to repel our full force. That is not the only question, interjected the fleet's assigned priest. The theological implications are troubling. If these humans once had war gods that transformed rather than perished, what does this suggest about Crathal's immutability? Meanwhile, on Earth, the United Defense Council had convened an emergency session. Representatives from every human colony and Earth nation gathered to assess the situation. The quantum displacement field had been remarkably effective, but its power requirements meant it couldn't be deployed again for at least 72 hours. The second Krell wave is larger and now forewarned, Admiral Reed informed the Council. Our element of surprise is gone. Dr. Hayes had been working around the clock with her xenocultural team, analyzing the data from their interactions with the Krell. There's something we're missing, she told the Council. The Krell priest showed genuine theological curiosity. Their religious doctrine may be more flexible than we initially believed. Tom Miller, who had led the diplomatic engagement, agreed. They were particularly interested in how our war gods transformed rather than disappeared. I believe they're experiencing a cultural crisis that we might leverage. To what end? Asked the Martian colony representative skeptically. They still have us outnumbered and outgunned. To find a third path, Miller replied. Neither surrender nor total war. While the council debated, a small team led by Dr. Hayes had been granted permission to speak with the captured Krell warriors. Under heavy security, Hayes approached a detention facility where several mid-ranking Krell officers were being held. We wish to understand Krathal better, she told them directly. Not to mock or challenge your faith, but to find common ground. The Krell warriors initially responded with ritualized defiance, but their curiosity gradually overcame dogma. One officer, who identified himself as combat theologian Mokfin, finally engaged meaningfully. Our sacred texts speak of Krathal's earliest manifestation not as a conqueror, but as a defender, he explained reluctantly. The Scroll of First Blood describes how Krathal taught our ancestors to fight only after predator species threatened our extinction. Hayes carefully recorded everything, recognizing the potential significance. So, Krathal began as a protective deity, similar to how many of our war gods originated? The comparison is not entirely invalid, Mokfin admitted. But the purification crusades of the Third Dynasty reinterpreted the texts to emphasize conquest as the purest form of worship. This information raced back to the Defense Council, where it catalyzed a new strategy. If the Krell religion had its own internal contradictions and evolutionary history, perhaps there was a theological basis for coexistence that wouldn't require either side to abandon their core beliefs. In space, Drakmore's fleet had maintained position, neither advancing nor retreating, an unusual caution for Krell forces. Their sensors had detected unusual energy signatures throughout the solar system that suggested humanity's defensive capabilities extended far beyond what had been revealed. They are hiding their teeth, Drakmore observed, like the Night Stalkers of our ancient savannas, showing only a fraction of their strength to make us reassess. His priest seemed troubled. Fleet Lord, I have been reviewing the earliest Krathal texts. There are inconsistencies with current doctrine that may be relevant to our situation. Before Drakmore could respond, a transmission arrived, not from Earth's military command as expected, but from a human, religious leader. The elderly man wore simple clothing, but spoke with quiet authority. I am Brother Michael, from the Order of Mars Pacificus. We were once dedicated to the god of war, now transformed to a god of just defense. I request theological dialogue with your spiritual representatives. The Krell priest's expression was unreadable, but his voice betrayed interest. Such a discussion would be unprecedented. As is this entire situation, Drakmore noted. Perhaps Krathal has presented us with a unique challenge, one that requires wisdom as well as strength. The theological summit was unprecedented in galactic history. On the neutral ground of Europa Station, religious scholars from Earth met with Krell priests in what both sides carefully avoided calling a peace conference. Instead, it was framed as a convocation of martial wisdom, terminology that allowed the Krell to participate without explicitly contradicting their war doctrine. Brother Michael represented Earth's perspective, his Order of Mars Pacificus having preserved the historical transition of Mars from war god to protector deity. The Krell sent High Theologian Vexkor, a scholar with the rare authority to interpret Krathal's will. Admiral Reed watched the proceedings remotely with Dr. Hayes, both acutely aware that Earth's defensive capabilities would be stretched to their limits if diplomacy failed. The second Krell fleet remained in formation at the system's edge, neither advancing nor retreating, a standoff that couldn't last indefinitely. "They're searching their own doctrine for a way out," Hayes observed. "Their culture has backed them into a corner. Once a Krathal-blessed invasion begins, it traditionally cannot end without either conquest or the invader's sacrificial death." Reed nodded. "So, they need a theological loophole." On Europa, the dialogue had begun carefully, each side presenting historical texts about their martial deities. Brother Michael shared ancient Roman accounts of Mars, Greek stories of Ares, Norse tales of Tyr, and Japanese legends of Hachiman, tracing how each evolved from bloodthirsty beginnings to more complex protective roles. "The transformation was not abandonment," he explained. "Rather, our understanding of what constitutes true strength and honor in battle evolved. The core essence remained: courage, discipline, strategic thinking, while the purpose shifted from conquest to protection." Vexcor listened intently, occasionally consulting ancient Krell tablets he had brought from their sacred archives. "Your perspective is not without parallel in our earliest texts," he admitted finally. "The parable of Krathal's shield speaks of a time when the god of war turned aside from a weaker enemy, declaring, 'There is no glory in crushing those who cannot resist, only in facing worthy challenges.'" This revelation sent ripples through both delegations. The Krell warriors present shifted uncomfortably, while human scholars leaned forward with renewed interest. "Is it possible," Brother Michael suggested carefully, "that humanity presents Krathal with a unique theological puzzle? A species that honors the virtues of the warrior, courage, strength, strategy, without worshipping war itself?" Back on Earth, preparations continued for what might still become a civilization-ending conflict. The quantum displacement field was being recalibrated, defensive positions strengthened. But something had changed in the broader human psyche. Ancient warrior traditions that had been preserved as cultural heritage rather than active practice. Samurai disciplines, Spartan training methods, Roman battle strategies were being re-examined with new purpose. "We've remembered something important," Miller told the Defense Council. "Our ancestors didn't abandon their martial traditions. They transformed them. The samurai code became the backbone of Japanese business ethics. Roman military discipline evolved into civil service principles. We channeled those energies rather than discarding them." On Mars colony, something unexpected was occurring. The small shrine to the planet's namesake deity, maintained for centuries as a historical curiosity, had become a gathering place. Colonists left offerings, not bloodied weapons as ancient Romans might have, but symbols of protection, security badges, engineering tools, medical equipment. Mars, it seemed, was being remembered not just as a god of war, but as the protector of civilization. Meanwhile, the Krell fleet received continuous updates from the Theological Summit. Fleet Lord Drakmor found himself in an unprecedented situation. The humans had neither surrendered nor been conquered, yet they had shown martial prowess worthy of Krathal's respect. "The ancient challenge protocols might apply," his priest suggested tentatively. "Those haven't been invoked in 3,000 years, Drakmor responded, but the idea had taken root. On Europa, the dialogue had reached a crucial juncture. Vexcor presented a previously untranslated section of Krell scripture, the Testament of Worthy Opponents. This text describes how Krathal once encountered a species that fought only to defend, never to conquer. Instead of destroying them, he declared them shields of honor and set them apart from conquest targets. The human delegation recognized the potential significance immediately. Brother Michael responded carefully, "And what became of these shields of honor?" "The text says they were to be tested regularly, to ensure their strength remained worthy, but never conquered completely." Vexicor's voice carried a mixture of wonder and uncertainty. "Such a designation has never been applied in living memory." "Perhaps," Brother Michael suggested, "because no species since has demonstrated the particular balance that humanity represents, capable of great warfare, but committed to peace when possible." The Theological Summit continued for 3 more days, delving deeper into both traditions. What emerged was remarkable. a framework that allowed the Krell to recognize humanity not as enemies to be conquered, but as worthy challengers, a designation within Krell theology that permitted honorable coexistence punctuated by ritualized tests of strength rather than extinction wars. When Admiral Reed received the proposal, he recognized both its elegance and its fragility. They're offering us a way to exist within their theological framework, regular war games instead of actual wars. Controlled military exercises that satisfy their religious requirements without leading to extinction-level conflicts, Hayes clarified. It's brilliantly adapted to their psychology. Reed looked thoughtful. And perhaps to ours as well. We've tried to deny our capacity for warfare, to pretend we've evolved entirely beyond it. But maybe there's wisdom in acknowledging that martial capacity and channeling it constructively. 5 years after the Krell invasion force entered the Sol system, Mars Colony hosted the third Interspecies Martial Championship. What had begun as a theological compromise had evolved into something neither humanity nor the Krell could have predicted. A complex series of military exercises, strategic competitions, and combat simulations that satisfied the Krell religious requirements while allowing both species to coexist without annihilation. Admiral Reed, now retiring after overseeing the development of the championship protocols, watched as human and Krell teams competed in a zero-gravity tactical scenario. The aggressive, conquest-driven Krell and the adaptable, defense-oriented humans had each developed distinctive approaches that now cross-pollinated between their forces. Remarkable how far we've come, Dr. Hayes commented, joining him at the observation deck. Her work in xenotheology had earned her the unprecedented honor of being named an interpreter of Krathal's will by the Krell High Temple, the first non-Krell ever given such recognition. From the brink of extinction to this, Reed agreed, though I doubt either side would have predicted quite this outcome. Below them, the competition concluded with ritual acknowledgments between the teams. The human captain and Krell war leader clasped arms in the ceremonial grip that had become the symbol of their unusual relationship. Neither truly allies nor enemies, but something new in galactic history. The Galactic Council is still trying to categorize our relationship, Hayes noted with amusement. Their diplomatic protocols have no classification for ritualized adversaries who otherwise cooperate. The transformation had gone far beyond mere military accommodation. Krell religious doctrine had undergone what their theologians carefully termed a restoration of ancient wisdom rather than reform. The concept of worthy challengers had expanded to include cultural and technological competition alongside martial contests. Meanwhile, humanity had reclaimed aspects of its martial heritage that had been downplayed for centuries. The virtues associated with their ancient war gods, courage, discipline, strategic thinking, protective strength, had been reintegrated into cultural consciousness without the bloodlust and conquest mindset. Have you seen the new Mars Temple? Hayes asked, referring to the structure recently completed on Olympus Mons. Reed nodded. Fascinating design. Half memorial to our war dead, half celebration of protective strength. Nothing like the ancient Roman temples to Mars, and yet connected to that lineage. The temple had become a point of pilgrimage for both species. Krell warriors came to study what they called the gentle strength paradox. How restraint could coexist with martial prowess. Humans visited to reconnect with a balanced understanding of their capacity for both violence and peace. High theologian Vexcor asked me something interesting yesterday, Hayes said. He wanted to know if our war gods truly disappeared, or if they simply transformed beyond recognition. Reed considered this. What did you tell him? That perhaps gods don't disappear. They evolve as we evolve. Mars didn't vanish, he matured alongside us. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Fleet Lord Drakmor, now serving as the Krell ambassador to Sol system. Age had weathered his battle ridges, but his posture remained proudly martial. Admiral Reed, Dr. Hayes, he greeted them with the formal Krell salute. The Wargame Council requests your presence. The evaluation of today's exercises is beginning. As they walked together, Drakmor added more personally, My son begins training at your Earth Defense Academy next cycle. He will be the first Krell to study human strategic doctrine formally. An honor, Reed replied sincerely. The integration program has been remarkably successful. Indeed, Limited cultural exchange had begun between their species. Human martial arts had found enthusiastic Krell practitioners, while Krell battle meditation techniques were being adopted by human military units for their focus-enhancing properties. There is a growing theological movement among our younger priests, Drakmor said carefully. They suggest that Krathal's highest wisdom was not in creating warriors who only destroy, but warriors who know when to fight and when to build. Hayes recognized the magnitude of this shift. That sounds remarkably similar to how our war gods transformed. Perhaps, Drakmor acknowledged, our gods are not so different after all. They simply reached us at different stages of our development. The observation deck looked out over the Martian landscape, where human and Krell ships rested side by side. Beyond them, the newly established joint defense perimeter extended through the system, protection against other threats that might emerge from the galaxy. The irony isn't lost on me, Reed said quietly. Our gentler approach to war gods nearly led to our extinction, yet ultimately created something unprecedented. Two species that channel their martial capacities without destroying each other. Hayes smiled. Perhaps that's the ultimate evolution of a war god. Not to fade away, but to teach its followers that true strength lies in knowing not just how to fight, but when to fight, and what to fight for. As they joined the War Game Council, human and Krell representatives rose in mutual respect. Warriors who had found a third path between endless conquest and naive pacifism. They had created a future neither species would have imagined possible, guided by the transformed wisdom of gods once dedicated solely to bloodshed. Humanity had no god of war because theirs had been too gentle to survive in their original form. Instead, those gods had evolved into something more complex and ultimately more enduring, deities of protection, justice, and strength tempered by wisdom. And in doing so, they had saved not only humanity, but perhaps the Krell as well. 10 years later, the unthinkable happened. A massive armada from the Varaxian hegemony, a species that had conquered 17 star systems through ruthless efficiency, appeared at the edge of both human and Krell space. Their invasion force dwarfed even the combined might of humanity and the Krell Empire. The Varaxian overlord's message was simple. Surrender or be eradicated. They had no interest in theology or cultural exchange. Their conquests were driven by cold calculation, resources extracted, populations enslaved, resistance crushed. On the newly constructed battle station orbiting Jupiter, an unprecedented joint war council convened. Fleet Lord Drakmor, now Supreme Commander of Krell forces, stood alongside Admiral James Wilson, Reed's successor as head of Earth's defense forces. The holographic displays showed the overwhelming numbers of the Varaxian fleet. They expect us to fight separately, Wilson observed. Their analysts will have studied our history of ritualized competition and concluded we cannot truly ally. Drakmor's battle ridges darkened with determination. Then they understand neither Krathal nor your transformed war gods. Dr. Hayes, now serving as cultural liaison between the species, entered with several Krell priests and human religious leaders. Among them was Brother Michael, his face lined with age but his eyes clear. The Joint Theological Committee has reached a conclusion, Hayes announced. The priests of Krathal have invoked the Covenant of Shared Battle, an ancient rite that temporarily binds different warrior cultures against a common threat. Brother Michael stepped forward, and our Order of Mars Pacificus recognizes the Varaxians as the type of threat our protective war deity evolved specifically to face. Not a worthy challenger, but a force that threatens all life and civilization. The strategic implications were momentous. For the first time, Krell and human forces would fight not against each other in ritual combat, but side by side against a genuine enemy. Captain Mara Reed, daughter of the now-retired admiral, commanded the first Joint Strike Force. Her second in command was Vroktor, son of Vrokthar, and the first Krell graduate of Earth's Defense Academy. Their mission was to test the Varaxian defenses and gather tactical data. My father often spoke of the irony, Mara told Vroktor as their ships prepared for departure, that our gentler gods of war ultimately made us stronger than if we'd remained conquest-driven. And our priests now speak of Krathal's greatest test, Vroktor replied, whether his followers can expand their understanding of glorious battle to include fighting alongside worthy allies rather than against worthy enemies. The joint fleet launched, humanity's adaptive technology complementing the Krell's overwhelming firepower. What the Varaxians encountered was something unprecedented in galactic history. Two martial cultures whose strengths perfectly balanced each other's weaknesses, guided by philosophical frameworks that had evolved beyond simple bloodlust. As the first skirmishes concluded with surprising victories against the numerically superior Varaxian forces, a message traveled between the allied fleets. It originated from the Mars Temple on Olympus Mons, where Krell priests and human religious leaders had conducted a joint ceremony invoking both Krathal and the transformed spirit of Mars. May our gods of war, both fierce and gentle, guide our hands, one to remind us of the strength needed to protect, the other to remind us of the wisdom needed to know what is worth protecting. Together, they make us not merely warriors, but guardians of something greater than conquest, the right of all sentient beings to choose their own path. The war would be long and costly, but as the Varaxians encountered this unprecedented alliance, they began to realize their analytical error. They had calculated the military capabilities of both species, but had failed entirely to understand the philosophical transformation that had occurred. How the gentle evolution of humanity's war gods had created not weakness, but a new kind of strength that even the conquest-driven Krell had come to respect and, in their own way, embrace. In the command center of the Varaxian flagship, the Overlord watched with growing concern as the joint human-Krell fleet executed maneuvers that should have been impossible for recent adversaries. "What manner of species are these?" he demanded of his advisors. The answer, had he been able to understand it, was simple. They were species whose gods of war had taught them the ultimate lesson, that true strength lies not in conquest, but in knowing what is worth fighting for, and who is worth fighting alongside.